I don't know whether it has that capacity, but okay. Okay, good morning. Morning. Yeah. What? All right, good morning, good morning, good morning. Shabbat Shalom. Nice to have you all here. Shabbat Shalom. Happy almost Thanksgiving. A couple of announcements before we get started. Pop, happy birthday. Happy birthday. Happy birthday. Hope it's a really good birthday. Okay. This afternoon, following our Torah study, you're welcome. There's two different services in the building. There is the main sanctuary. Two lovely kids who are twins are having their bar mitzvah. And down the hall is the Neshama Minyan. Nina is going to be leading a wonderful musical and spiritual minyan on the theme of women and power in the Torah. Guess who she thought was going to win the election? But women and power in the Torah down at the Neshama Minyan, and everybody's invited to join that. Following this, and then there's lunch, and then there's Parsha study upstairs in the Bernstein balcony. Today is Shabbos. On Monday night, we're having our College of Jewish Studies. Usually it's Wednesday night, but this week, of course, Wednesday night is Erev Yontif. And because we're a frum congregation, we observe these. In fact, we're so religious, we do 2 days of Thanksgiving, Thursday and Friday. So Monday night will be College of Jewish Studies. It's also going to be our annual APAC night. And our guest that evening is a journalist, Khalid Abu Tomeh, who is NBC's senior producer in the Middle East and a frequent writer for the major intellectual journals. He is a Palestinian Arab, born in Israel, and has a very unique perspective on Palestinian culture and Palestinian independence. And it'd be worth coming to hear how he sees the whole region and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and its possible resolutions. That's on Monday night at 7:30. We're going to start, but 7 o'clock they'll open the doors and there'll be a lot of people. So please come for that. The following week we revert back to Wednesday night, and that night we're sharing an evening with the organization Americans for Peace Now, and our guests will be. Wait a minute, is that the right one? Yeah, our guest will be. Our guest will be Daniel Levy, who's the head of the Middle East Institute, and he'll be talking about what it might look like to negotiate peace with the Palestinians. And then following that, our guest will be Tal Becker of the. Tal Becker is the legal advisor to Israel's foreign ministry, and he is the negotiator. He is the guy who sits down with Abbas and Saeed Erekat and all the others. When you hear about Israeli talks going on in Madrid or Geneva, he's the guy. And he'll be coming to talk about his experiences as a peace negotiator, as well as his vision of the whole region right now. Wonderful teacher. So many opportunities to sit together with wise people and talk about Israel and the region and what its prospects for peace are these next coming weeks. So that's on the College of Jewish Studies. We will continue Shabbos morning. Next week is Thanksgiving weekend, but Torah goes on. So bring your turkey leg, come on in, and we will study Torah together at 9 o'clock. And then continue with the prayers. Come in. What else did I leave out? I think I got everything. Last night was really funny with Herschel. Come on in. Yeah, it was a lot of people, and it was very good. It was very good. It was very funny. I can repeat every joke if you want to hear them all. Well, it was relatively clean, so I can repeat every joke. Okay, this morning there are 3 Torah portions that describe the career of Abraham. Last week we saw the first one. Lech lecha me'artzecha. Leave your land and enter the world, v'heyeh bracha, and be a blessing. Abraham is given this responsibility to be a blessing, to be the vessel of divine blessing in the world. This will be God's way of completing the work of creation through the life and the work of this man. Today, the Torah portion is going to ask a very serious question. What does it mean to be God's partner? What does that mean fundamentally? And I want to take a look at this picture from two different perspectives today, from outside the city and sort of inside the city. So the story begins with three angels who show up at Abraham's tent, three men, three travelers. Abraham prepares them a meal, and when they finished eating the meal, the first one reveals that he and Sarah are going to have a child. Sarah begins to laugh hysterically because she says, look, I'm 90, and look at my old man. And Vayikra will not be invented for many centuries. And God says, what? You don't think I can produce miracles? And she's pregnant. Mazel tov. Please do not try this at home. Then it's the other two angels who then proceed to enter into the encounter with Sodom and Gomorrah. So if you have the Chumash, we're on page 102, right? And the page that I gave you we'll look at together in just a moment. Page 102. This is a story that is very, very important. It raises so many very interesting issues, philosophical issues and moral issues. And for people of a certain theoretical bent, it's the sort of core narrative, okay? The men set out from there and looked down towards Sodom, Abraham walking to see them off. Now, that's the last action in the story. The rest of it's going to be conversation. Now, the Lord had said, shall I hide from Abraham what I'm going to do? Who is God talking to? God is talking to whom? Himself. So this is divine rumination. Well, the men are representations of God. They're messengers. It's God talking to himself. And let's understand the depth of the question. Shall I hide from Abraham what I'm going to do? The simple answer to that question is, of course you should. You're God, right? You're not accountable. You're not responsible. I have to tell my wife where I'm going, right? She wants to know where I am, how long I'll be there, and when I'm coming home, right? You know, I'm going to the brothel. I'm having an affair. I'll be home by dinner. Okay, dear, you know. But that's what being married is all about, right? Being married is being accountable to somebody else in the world for your whereabouts. Being part of being somebody's partner. Thank you, Neil. Thanks so much. Being somebody's partner in a business means being accountable. The question, shall I hide from Abraham what I'm going to do? Yeah, hi. You're whispering to me a question? I'll be home by dinner.
Invitations that Jane left to my lunch. Do you know where they are? I looked in Janet's office. They are not there.
I don't know. Jane said she was going to come and drop them off. I will go look for them when I'm finished with this. Bye, darling.
She heard you were going to a brothel.
You know, we're married so long that the brothel wouldn't bother her. It's my coming home late for supper that would bother her. That's what she would, like, you're going to be late? You know, like that's what would bother her. So it's, you know, when you get to a certain point in your marriage, these things sort of settle. You know what I mean? They sort of settle into patterns. That's what happens. Shall I hide from Abraham what I'm going to do? That's the question. And I want you to just absorb the answer. Is God accountable to a human being? Does God have to explain himself to a human being? Can you look into the universe and see what you see in the world and say, God, explain this to me. Explain this to me. This is the whole question. What is your stance in front of the universe? There's another book of the Bible, which we did last year when we studied this text, so I didn't bring it this time, called Job. J-O-B. Jews never read Job for some strange reason. And Job is about a guy who's got a miserable life, tortured horribly, and every time he says to God, why did you do this to me? At the end of the book, what does God say to Job? Shut up. You're a man, I'm God. You don't ask me questions. I don't have to explain myself to you. You wouldn't understand anyway. Shut up. Job before the universe is the stance that you might expect. God is omnipotent. God is God. Who am I to question God? To question God. But Abraham has a different relationship. Job stands in front of nature. And nature is unaccountable to us, right? If there's an earthquake, you can't scream to the earthquake, don't you understand? I'm a rabbi. You know? It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. Tornadoes, hurricanes, earthquakes, cancer, all of the affectations of nature that torture us, you can't ask nature for an explanation. That's how Job meets God. Abraham meets God in a different context. Abraham is covenanted. And when you enter into covenant, the underlying logic of covenant is God enters into relationship with man and subjects himself. God now subjects himself to being questioned. To being questioned. Shall I hide from Abraham what I'm going to do? This is a remarkable idea. It's a remarkable idea that you could look into the world and you very well can have moral indignation and say, I'm angry at what I see. What right did you have to do this? That's exactly the stance that Abraham is sketching here. So look at the next line. Shall I hide from Abraham what I'm going to do? Since Abraham is going to be a great populous nation, and all the nations are to bless themselves by him, for I have singled him out that he may instruct his children and posterity to keep the way of the Lord by doing what is just and right. To keep the way of the Lord by doing what is just and right. God is identified with justice and righteousness. And if God is identified with justice and righteousness, Abraham has every right to question. And if Abraham is to be singled out to carry that message into the world, then what's being said here is that God and man share a moral language. That God and man can talk about these things. That God can't say to Abraham what he said to Job, which is, shut up, I'm God, you're not, you have no right to question. On the contrary, you want me to bring justice and righteousness in the world? You got to explain what you're doing. This is a very different stance toward divine authority. A very different stance. So what happens? So now look at verse 20 with me, okay? Then the Lord said, the outrage of Sodom and Gomorrah is so great, their sin is so grave, I will go down to see whether they've acted according to the outcry that has reached me. If not, I'll take note. If not, I'll take note. Now, that's a strange sentence, isn't it? It's a non sequitur. What? I'll go down and take a look. I have these angels on the ground, you see? Angels are like drones. You know, they have cameras. And so he's going to send the angels into the city to see if the place is as rotten as he heard. But you see, if he already knows that the place is rotten, why does he have to send angels to go find out? And the answer is because he's no longer ascertaining facts. He's now modeling the procedures of justice. When you suspect that a crime has been committed, you can't simply haul out the offender and kill him. You have to have a trial. You have to gain facts. You have to adjudicate the case. And that's what he's doing. He's modeling now a model for justice. Because the non sequitur is, the outcry of Sodom and Gomorrah is so great, I'll smash it. But he's going to go look because he wants to show you. Now that I have entered into the realm of human justice, I will show you how to do it. All right? The men went on from there to Sodom while Abraham remained standing before the Lord. Verse 23, page 103. Everybody see these two words? Two wonderful words, beautiful words. Vayigash Avraham. Stop a second. Vayigash, it's one of those beautiful words. It occurs a number of times in the Tanakh, in the Bible. The most famous one is Judah. Yeah, Judah standing in front of Yosef, right? Vayigash means he stepped up to the plate. This is if the Bible knew baseball. He steps into the encounter. I want to suggest something about that word, which is really important. You might think that Abraham's response is impulsive. It's a reflex. It comes naturally. Sometimes we say something we didn't mean to say. It just sort of blurts out. It splits out. This word eliminates that presumption. This was an intentional act. Abraham gulps hard and decides to step into an encounter with the divine. This is intentional, because if you're going to challenge authority, if you're going to stand for justice, you need to understand it's a scary thing to do. So he steps into it's a deliberate act to step into the encounter. He steps into the encounter and he makes the famous speech. This is one of the great speeches in the Bible. Notice that it begins and ends with questions. It begins and ends with a question, right? It's actually all questions. Will you keep away the innocent along with the guilty? You're going to destroy the city? Are you going to just wipe it out? What if there be 50 innocent in the city? Will you wipe out the place and not forgive it for the sake of the 50? And here's the verse I love the most. Chalila lecha, far be it from you, to do such a thing, to bring death upon the innocent and the guilty, so that innocent and guilty fare alike. Far be it from you. Shall not the judge of all the earth do justice? The problem with that translation is the Hebrew is chalila lecha. My professor H.L. Ginsburg at the Jewish Theological Seminary, who was born in Eastern Europe and educated at Oxford and spoke a beautiful English, for him, chalila lecha meant far be it from you. Right? More like far be it from you, But chalila lecha is earthy, right? What is chalila lecha? When mom and dad went away to their bakers convention in Las Vegas, Bubby came to stay with my brothers and me. And as soon as my parents' car turned the corner and they were out of sight, my brothers and I began beating the snot out of each other. It was horrible. And poor Bubby, who was all of 4'1", right, and 100 pounds maybe soaking wet, would come into the room and see me standing over my brother with a baseball bat, ready to beat his brains in. And she wouldn't touch me, and she wouldn't raise her voice. She just said 3 words. She give me the look. You know that look that's been perfected under 200 generations of Bubbies? That look of, I'm so disappointed in you. I'm ashamed of you. You're so much better than that. And then 3, anybody here have a Yiddish-speaking grandmother? Right? 3 words when you did something you shouldn't have done. Ready? Shanda, von der Cherpa. Not even Bisha. It was Shanda and Cherpa. Shanda means what? Shame on you, right? Cherpa means noch shame on you. Even more shame on you. And then she dropped the bomb. Feh. Feh. It's like, oh, Bubby, hit me with a stick. Don't give me feh. Because the last thing a kid wants to do in the world is offend your Bubby. Like she's the only person in the world who loved me unconditionally. Mom wanted to know what grades I got. Dad wanted to know what college I'm going to. Bubby just loved me. And when Bubby drops feh on you, it's like, oh. That's chalila lecha. That's what Abraham says to God. Shanda necherpa epis. Feh. Like shame on you. Like shame on you. Now, and the line is beautiful. So if you can read a little Hebrew, it's worth learning Hebrew just for this line. It's verse 25, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines down in the Hebrew. Chalila lecha me'asot kadavar hazeh. Shame on you for doing a thing like this. What? Lehamit tzadik im rasha. Lehamit means to bring death, to kill. Lehamit tzadik im rasha. To kill the righteous together with the good with the evil, the right with the wrong, the innocent together with the guilty. And then here it is. V'haya, so that it would be in your world, what? Ka tzadik ka rasha. So that in your world there would be no moral differentiation. So that in your world, black and white, good and bad, evil and good, innocent and guilty are all mushed together, are all mashed together without any differentiation. So there is no moral judgment to be had in the world. Is that the world you wanted? Is that the world you want to live in? Is that the world you want? But is that the world you want? That's the question. Is that the world you want? Right? Then he repeats, Chalil lecha, shame on you. And then he drops the final one. Hashofet kol haaretz lo yaseh mishpat. You're the judge of all the earth. You're not going to do justice? Now, that's the speech. Now, what happens next is extraordinary, right? It's really the next line, which is the most extraordinary. Because what should God do to him? God just smash him. Yeah, like, done, finished. I mean, what do you need this for? Right? What? You know, why would you put up with this? Right? But what does God say? Remember Jackie Mason? Remember the comedian Jackie Mason? He once said that the greatest Jew who ever lived was Menachem Begin. And Begin will go down in history for his famous words. All right. Okay. All right. You know, all right. Right? God says, all right. You're right. Fine. Now, what does that mean? It's like, you won. You just won an argument with God. Right? All right. Vayomer Adonai, if I find 50, I'll save the city. Fine, no problem. Now, Abraham has sold enough camels in the Shuk of Beersheba, right? He knows that once you get, now he's got the guy in the shop, now he's going to handle it a little bit, right? All right, let's see. You said 50. How about 5? 5. If you said 50, if you're going to save the city for 50, you have to save the city for 5. So what if I got 45? 45. I got 45 in the back. Do I have 40? I have 45 on the side. Do I have 30? I have 30 over here. I have 30. Do I see 20 anywhere in the room? Do I see 20 over here? 20 over here? 10. Best offer now. 10. There it is. 10 going once. 10 going twice. Sold. It's silly. This is biblical humor. You're not laughing. I don't understand you people. This is the Bible having fun with us. This is the Bible stretching the idea that once man enters covenant with God, God becomes morally accountable to man. That's stretching that idea to its absurd end. That you could bargain like this for the fate of a city. That you can bargain like this and God goes along with it. This is the absurdity of this story. Now, there's a hint here which I want to point out to you. It's an eternal hint. If you look at verse number 27, this is the very beginning. God agrees to the 50, and now Abraham begins arguing, and he says, "Vayan Avraham, vayomer hinei ho'alti l'derim ad Adonai, va'anochi afar ve'efer." But dust and ashes. There's only 2 places in the whole Hebrew Bible where that phrase is used. Job and Abraham. It comes at the end of the book of Job when God shows up to Job in a hurricane and says to Job, "Shut up, you never question me." And Job relents. Job gives in. Job surrenders and says, "What am I? I am but dust and ashes." In that context, it's real. I am but dust. I am humbled by you, God. Therefore, I give up my question. Here, the same words are used, but it's not. But it's ironic, right? I am but dust and ashes, but I'm going to see if I can get out of you a concession. You see how it's used here ironically? The 2 phrases relate to each other because Job is the opposite of Abraham. Because if you adopt the religion of Job, if Job is your book, if Job is the Torah, if Job is the holy book, when you see injustice in the world, all you can do is say, that's the way it is. Baruch Dayan Emet. That's the way it is. That's the way it is. There's nothing I can do. But if you adopt the religion of Abraham, when you see injustice in the world, you're outraged. You're outraged. You stand up, you scream, you yell, you protest. I want you to look at, forget God for just a second. I want you to look at the human being we're talking about here. I want you to look at the 2 models of religious life offered by these 2 human beings, Job and Abraham. What does it mean to walk the world and live the life of acceptance, of resignation? In a certain way, you gain a certain equanimity from this, right? Because if you can really live acceptance, you don't let it bother you. You don't let it bother you. It becomes, you surrender to the reality and you don't let it bother you. That's the way of equanimity. It's the way of equanimity. How about Abraham? Equanimity is not a Jewish value. I don't know if you knew that. You will not find tranquility in Judaism. You want tranquility? There's places to go get it, but we don't build Japanese gardens, right? You don't see Jews walking around, That's not, we're yelling and screaming and waving our hands. So there's no equanimity in Judaism. What you get instead is the dignity of a moral warrior.
So where was he in Akedat Yitzchak?
Well, that's it. We'll get to that. But I want you to see this as a model of religious life and the trade-off. The trade-off is you get to argue with God, but that doesn't change the world, by the way. It's your stance in the world. Are you going to be outraged? Because that leads to moral action. That leads to doing something about it. The problem with equanimity is that you accept everything and you're not going to do anything. The problem with protest, with outrage, is that you're going to live with tumult inside all day. A lot of Malaks sold to Jews, right? Not a lot of Malaks sold to Job's descendants, but Malaks, it's a lot of Jews gulping Malaks because you're living in tumult all the time. I even think tumult is a Jewish word. Doesn't it sound like a Jewish word? You had a hand up a minute ago. Who had a hand up a minute ago? Sherry.
I like that you're comparing him to Job, but I also think that up until now, God has covenanted Abraham.
Right.
And this is Abraham testing God, like we're going to see then God testing Abraham, which is that sort of covenantal foil back and forth between the two of them, sort of testing the relationship, which is what every relationship does.
Yeah.
To some degree.
Testing relationships is an interesting phrase, isn't it?
It's not PC, but I think it's...
It's pushing it. We'll push the limits and see what happens. Stephen.
Is it because, two things about Abraham, quote, getting away with it as compared to Job?
Yeah.
Job was me, and then Abraham is them.
Yeah.
And maybe it's another moral test, i.e., Isaac.
Yeah.
And now he's testing his boychik to see how will he react to this.
Right.
Is that possible?
It could be. That's one of the ways of reconciling, to see, the difference between when you're arguing for somebody else and you're arguing for yourself. Right. Yeah. More.
If there were no righteous people in Sodom, what was the source of the outcry?
What? People were suffering. You'll see in a minute. People are suffering. It can be a place filled with suffering. That's exactly what we're going to take a look at in just a moment. Okay, Pop.
God made a partnership with men so they don't have to do it.
Yeah.
But maybe it's because in the tradition they saw that nothing gets done with only prayer. You have to do it with your hands.
Yeah, and it comes with a certain sense of outrage, right? It comes with a certain sense of outrage. Any great social movement is born in a sense of outrage. If you're a morally temperate person, you're not going to get up and go and protest. You're not going to go and sacrifice the self to change the world. You want the world changed? This is what it takes. It takes somebody willing, Vayigash Abraham, to step into the fray and to say, this is my sense of the world. This violates my sense of the ideal. And I can't live with it. I can't live with the gap between what I see in front of me and the ideal. And Mort's comment a moment ago, I think, is very, I overlooked it. I didn't mean to overlook it, but when Abraham says, is that the world you want? Rahaya kat tzaddik karasha, a world where tzaddik and rasha, good and evil, are all mashed together, and you said, that's the world. That's the point. That's the point. The Torah is asking you as the reader, no, is that the world you want? Is that the world you want to raise your children in? Is that the world you want to give to the next generation? No. That's exactly what it says. Now, take the sheet I got. I just wanted to look up. I was curious, which is a very dangerous thing, because I own a lot of books. What did see, you asked me before, what was the sin of Sodom? Sodom was such a place that it needed to be destroyed, right? Now, I've lived in New York City. That place ought to be destroyed, I'm talking, what was it in Sodom that earned it this this terrible accusation, right? So sex, Alavai should be sex. I didn't find sex anywhere, right? We'll get to that in a minute. That's actually not what they wanted. That's actually not what they wanted. Here's the traditions ideas. Let's take a look at the traditions ideas. So this is a sampling of rabbinic traditional midrash written from the 1st to the 4th century. Okay? Pirkei Avot. Remember Pirkei Avot? Pirkei Avot is a small book of the Mishnah, 2nd century, 3rd century Israel. Right? Pirkei Avot says there are 4 kinds of human beings, 4 human characters, right? Ha'omer, the one who says, what's mine is yours and what's yours is yours, this is righteousness. Okay? I'll share with you what I have, you keep what you got, right? One who says what's yours is mine and what's mine is mine, that's evil. That's a crook, right? They call you in the middle of the afternoon. All the time, I get phone calls now. They want my solar panels. They want to sell me God knows what. One who says, what is yours is mine is yours. That's foolishness. But here's the one that's important, right? The one who says, what's mine is mine and what's yours is yours. Shali shali v'shelcha shelcha. There's 2 opinions. The first one says, Zem midah benoni, which means this is an ordinary ethic. This is the ethic of the common person. This is mundane. And then the second opinion, which is really quite remarkable, says, Lo zemidat stom. This is the ethic of Sodom. So what is the ethic of Sodom? Shali shali v'shelcha shelcha. What's mine is mine and what's yours is yours. My business is my business, your business is your business. Your fate is not my problem. Your destiny is not my concern. Your suffering is not my concern. Shali shali v'shelcha shelcha. It's what we call in sociology, they call this privatism. We call it an American individualism, right? Well, my neighbor has his tsuris, that's not my problem. Right? It's not my problem. Henry James, who was a great American novelist, lived in Paris, didn't like America very much. He once said, America is a hotel culture. It's a beautiful phrase, hotel culture. What happens in a hotel, right? First of all, I don't own the place. I'm just staying there temporarily. I move into my room. I don't fully unpack, right? And what happens in the room next door is none of my business, right? If they make too much noise, I'll check out and get a different hotel. But shali shali v'shelcha shelcha, it's not my problem. It's not my problem, right? And if you want to see a wonderful modern reflection of the same idea, turn the page over and look at the second source, which is Alexis de Tocqueville. De Tocqueville, you remember, was a French nobleman who came to America in the early part of the 19th century to figure out how come we got democracy right, and the French kept having tsuris with it, right? And he writes a very big book. This is one reflection that de Tocqueville offers, right? I had remarked during my stay in the United States that a democratic state of society might offer facility establishment of despotism. Despotism can grow out of democracy. How so? And I perceived upon my return to Europe how much use had already been made by most of our rulers of the notions, sentiments, and wants created by this same condition, this same social condition, for the purpose of extending the circle of power. He's talking about France, right? Napoleon grows out of the French Revolution. I seek to trace the novel feature under which despotism may appear in the world. How come democracies degenerate into dictatorships? The first thing that strikes observation is an unaccountable number of men incessantly endeavoring to produce the petty and paltry pleasures with which they glut their lives. That's a great line. Each of them living apart is a stranger to the fate of all the rest. His children and his private friends constitute to him the whole of mankind. As for the rest of his fellow citizens, he is closed to them. He sees them not. He touches them, but he feels them not. He exists in himself and for himself alone, and he may be said to have lost his country. How do you go from democracy to dictatorship? When a community says, Shali shali v'shelcha shelcha, what's mine is mine and what's yours is yours. My family, my community, they're my problem. Those people, they're not my problem. When you divide carefully between us and them, says Tocqueville, and you lose a sense of the whole, and the citizen no longer sees him or herself as responsible for the whole, that's the ground upon which dictatorship grows. Despotism grows. That is a remark. So according to Pirkei Avot and Tocqueville, the first sin of Sodom. Douglas.
Well, it's sort of a foundation of America that, that you should be reading Madison, that, Madison's concern was pure democracy and a tyranny of the majority.
Right.
And so he built or designed a system, where what would happen is that in order to form that majority, you would have to have the factions coalesce, and in the process of coming together, make the compromises necessary for the protection.
Imagine that. Compromise as the instrument of governing.
That's the theoretical underpinning of
Yes.
the Federalist Papers.
The Federalist Papers, written by Democrats, right? or communists or socialists. We'll see. Look at the next source. Come back to the first page now. Look at the one that says Genesis Rabbah. We'll skip Ezekiel. Here's Genesis Rabbah. Genesis Rabbah has a much more vivid imagination. So we saw theory number one is privatism. Here's theory number two. Taught Rabbi Levi, who was a great darshan. He was a great sermon giver. There was a case of two girls who went down to draw water from the well. That was the job of the daughters of a household. One said to her friend, "Why are you pale?" And the other said, "All the food is gone from our house and we're ready to die." What did the other do? She filled the jug with flour and exchanged it with her own. Each took the pail of the other. And when the people of Sodom found out, they took the girl who shared the food and they burned her. Said the Holy One, blessed be He, even if I wanted to keep silent the requirement of justice for a certain girl would not allow me to keep silent. It is not written in accord with their cry, but in according to her cry. That's the Torah. It's her cry. So who's the her? It's the girl who switched the buckets, referring to the particular girl. So according to this, what was the sin of Sodom? That they punished compassion. Now look at the next one. This is the Talmud, and what we have in the Talmud is not a complete drasha like this one, but a sort of digest of different suggestions. They probably even little notes that people took on sermons they sat through in shul. The men in Sodom grew arrogant because of the good which the Holy One, blessed be, had lavished upon them. Now, Sodom, the place of Sodom, by the way, is down near the Dead Sea. Anyone ever been there? Right, you drive down from Jerusalem, for example, you drive past Jericho, you make a right, and you end up in that the Dead Sea. Nothing. The hotels where they have palm. Nothing there. But once upon a time, says the Torah, that was the most fertile place on earth. That was before God zapped it, right? So what happened? The men of Sodom said, since our bread comes out of the earth, out of our earth, and it has the dust of gold on it, why should we tolerate strangers who come to us only to deplete our wealth? Come, I didn't write this, I just found it in the Talmud. Come, let us abolish the practice of traveling in our land. They built a wall.
You guys had different ideas for what was going to happen during it.
Here's another one, ready? They had beds upon which travelers slept. If the guest was too long, they shortened him by lopping off his feet. If too short, they stretched him out. Now that's a mythical theme. That's the Procrustean bed, right? That's a mythical theme that you find in Greek philosophy as well. It's not, so the symbol is that they tortured guests who came in, right? But now think of that as a metaphor for a minute. Think of that as a metaphor, okay? What's on the bed? An idea. An idea. If the idea fits my needs, what do? If the idea doesn't fit my needs, or if the facts don't fit my argument, what do? I either chop them off or stretch them. Right? I have a way of looking at the world. And if you bring me facts which are an anomaly, an exception to my way of looking at the world, what am I going to do? I'm going to trim the facts that I don't want to quote, or I'm going to stretch the facts that I do, and I'm going to keep my way of looking at the world. That's the sin of Sodom. Okay, here's another one. If a poor man happened to come there, every resident gave him a dinar. That's like a quarter, right? Upon which he wrote his name. But no bread was given. The store owners recognized such coins and refused to accept them. When the stranger died, each came and took back his dinar. Don't be so... Take that as a metaphor. What does that mean? That is, you give tzedakah, or you create a social welfare system whose purpose really isn't to care for the poor. A social welfare system whose purpose really is to benefit the wealthy. But it looks like you're doing righteousness. Under the guise of doing righteousness, you're actually destroying the poor, and you never had any intention whatsoever of making sure that the dispossessed were cared for. Because you don't care for the dispossessed. Because what's mine is mine, and what's yours is yours. There's another interesting metaphor. See how many good sermons come out of the Talmud, right? Certain maiden gave some bread to a poor man, hiding it in a pitcher. Why'd she have to hide it? Because it was illegal to give tzedakah in Sodom. When the matter became known, they daubed her with honey and placed her on a parapet of the wall, and the bees came and consumed her. So a horrible, horrible death. Right? Now, again, thus it was written, the cry of Sodom and Gomorrah is Rabbah, and Rabbi Yehuda said, no, it's Riba. Right? Okay, now, what's that one about? What's that one about? The bees, why would you choose that as a metaphor? What's that a metaphor of? Don't just think of it as a horror. It's a metaphor for something.
The unthinking swarm.
Yeah, it's the unthinking swarm. It's the death of 1,000 cuts, right? It's like no one of them could hurt you, but all of them together will kill you, right? So if you want to manipulate conscience, you can't just come along and say, from now on, no one helps poor people. But you could say, from now on, no one helps poor people like those. Or we can't let those poor people around because they'll threaten our prosperity. And you start out with reasonable compromises. And when you start adding up all the reasonable compromises, you end up with what? You end up with inequity. It's that, you see what's going on here? It's a very, very sly metaphor for how you manipulate a collective conscience. All right, here's that. Now, Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer is a 4th or 5th century source, and what they do is take up all these other midrashim and sort of tell the story. They sort of what Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer does is sort of collect all these sort of hints into a sort of collective narrative. So here's the story. Ready? Rabbi Nathaniel said, the men of Sodom had no consideration for the honor of their master, for God, by not distributing food to wayfarer and stranger. We'll see this in a minute. The desert had an ethic. In the desert, there is a very, very powerful ethic that you care for the traveler. Because if you don't have that ethic in the desert, no one will ever make it across the desert. We'll see that in just a minute. Abraham shows that ethic because when the 3 strangers show up, not knowing who they are, he invites them in and makes them a meal. Sodom was the city that violated the ethic of hospitality, of welcoming the stranger. They fenced in all the trees on top above their fruit so that they should not be seized, not even by the birds of heaven. Right? That was good. Rabbi Yoshua said, they appointed over themselves judges who were lying judges, and they oppressed every wayfarer and stranger who entered Sodom by their perverse judgments and send them forth naked. Anyone ever get a speeding ticket in a small town and you weren't speeding, or you were going a mile over the speed limit, and they give you some whopping ticket, and you can either pay the ticket or sit in jail, or pay the ticket, or they'll tell you, sure, you can have your court date 2 weeks from Wednesday, at 8 to 10 in the morning. You ever have that experience? The perversity of justice when you're a stranger in a town. It's a very interesting experience, right? Right? Rabbi Yehuda said, They made a proclamation in Sodom saying, everyone who strengthens the hand of the poor or the needy with a loaf of bread shall be burned by fire. Pelita, the daughter of Lot, remember Lot's Abraham's nephew, who wedded one of the magnates of Sodom. She saw a certain very poor man in the streets of the city, and her soul grieved for him. Every day when she went out to draw water, she put in a bucket all sorts of provisions from her home and fed that poor man. The men of Sodom said, how does the poor man live? When they ascertained the facts, they brought her to be burned by fire. Said she, sovereign of all worlds, champion my cause before the people of Sodom. Her cry ascended before the throne of glory. At that moment said, I will now descend and see whether the men of Sodom have done according to the cry of this young woman. I will turn her foundations upwards, and its surface shall be turned downward. That's Sodom. So what is Sodom? For the Midrash, what is Sodom? It's the paradigm for what? For what? It's the paradigm for a certain kind of society that might even seem reasonable on the surface to say, I have my rights, but turns out to be the compassionless society. The society that has no compassion. And the problem, the Midrash's problem is that Sodom was given this great wealth, that the land was fertile, that there were minerals there, that in exchange for the great wealth of the land, there was no sense of gratitude and no sense of compassion. There wasn't sense, instead, paranoia and hoarding. And that the compassionless society is a society that's doomed. It's a very interesting image. It's a very powerful image. Michael, go ahead.
This goes back to the idea that, people begin to think that the land upon which they grow their crops and the mines which give up the ore are really mine.
Right.
They don't understand that this is nature's product. This is God's product that's being given to you for the use of the betterment of the world,
right,
not for just the betterment of you.
Right. There's this basic acquisitive selfishness that comes without any gratitude, without any recognition that this is a blessing to you. Right?
In terms of democracy, I think when John Adams, at the beginning of our foundational papers, once said in one of his letters, he said, democracy is like a virgin that everyone seeks to deflower. Therefore, we have to always be on guard to protect her.
That's a very vivid image, right? That's a vivid image, right? So what you have here is, Jerry, go ahead.
I just want to say, I recollect another rabbinic concept, which perhaps is another particular for the swarm of bees, and that is that the sin of Saddam was to work in the collective and hide behind that collectivity as opposed to an individual taking action. So if a traveler came and said, I sell olives, I have a grove back home, and set up his store.
Right.
Saddam passed a law that said, we don't want to tie up our courts, and therefore the taking of one olive is not an offense punishable by law. Whereupon the entire city, every man came and took an olive and bankrupted the stranger.
Good. So it's the rule of the mob.
And conspiracy theory, which is a big part of American and English jurisprudence.
Good. Very nice. Very nice. Yeah. Hi. Wait, hang on a second. Elon.
So the problem I have with this section is that God is an external actor.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does it, when evil happens and the entire society goes to hell,
Yeah.
does it require an external actor?
That's a very interesting question. Is that the lesson of the story? That it requires an external?
Well, I'm worried about the U.S. at the moment.
Well, I'm not. I try so hard not to be political in this show.
You're doing great. We're loving it.
I am trying so hard not to descend into.
We're trying to push you.
No kidding. Look, it's an interesting question, because part of it, the religious question has to do with this. When you read the Bible, do you believe that they lived in a different world than we live in? Did they live in a world where fire and brimstone fell upon unrighteous cities, right? Or did they live in the same world that we live in? And if you believe that they lived in the same world that we live in, then this is not about an external actor coming to destroy. This is about how do you, it's a warning to you who build societies about how societies can move from great prosperity to great destruction. It's a warning about how you conduct a society. It's a homily in that sense, right? So, there are Jews who will say, well, in the Bible, God punishes, and maybe God will punish again. I mean, it's a warning. The other thing we've talked about before is, does history have rules? Does history have rules? Can you ascertain certain rules from history? Martin Luther King talked about an arc of justice, which bends, but it eventually arrives in justice. And is injustice, is there a dynamic in the world that injustice and somehow is self-contradictory and will destroy itself? Is that what's being said here? I mean, your question is a very fine question, and I'm not going to answer it because I think it's too fine a question. Yes.
Okay,
I want to get back to the text, so ask quickly.
About this. You're reading from Pirkei Avot.
I am.
And it says socialism is foolish.
Doesn't it? What's mine is yours, and what's yours is mine.
So then,
That reminds me, my brother once went to a Zionist socialist summer camp, and he brought a whole bag of candy bars, and they took them away from him and put them in kupa. And he called my parents and said, I want to come home. Okay. So what bothered him, of course, was the Orwellian all campers are created equal, but certain ones are created more equal, right?
So, moronic socialist.
I say moronic. It's foolish.
It says foolish. It says foolish.
Foolish.
So
That's not moronic. That's
in
foolish.
order to build a prosperous society,
Yeah.
you have to respect private property rights.
With the degree of compassion that the Torah is
Yes,
talking
with
about.
a degree of compassion, but you start with a concept: what is a property right? But a right to exclude others from what is yours.
But except that you start with the idea of what is mine is yours and what is yours is yours.
That's to share once you've built what is yours.
Okay, fair enough.
But you start with private property right.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. But it comes with responsibilities.
That part privately, but when you get somebody imposing on you from above,
Right.
That somehow says you aren't paying your fair share.
Right.
You get some issues.
Doug has two daughters who go to Berkeley. So your Shabbos table must be something, I tell you. I can only imagine the conversations around your Shabbos. You're right. You're exactly right. No, the Talmud recognizes private rights. The Bible recognizes not private property rights, but the rights to say that the use of a property is mine. Okay. But it always comes heavily impacted with that ethic of responsibility.
I get that, but the foundation of our society.
Yeah.
Inalienable rights, rights from God, right?
Yeah.
Life, liberty,
And the pursuit of property. You're right.
Property into pursuit of happiness, so he's changing it slightly, but it's still property.
Yeah, because he was writing this song and it didn't fit the rhyme.
It's from law, life, liberty, property.
Yeah, life, liberty, and property was the first draft of the Declaration. Yes, please.
Further, if this is what it's supposed to be,
Yeah.
then why should I try
Yeah.
to acquire wealth
Yeah.
if I can get yours? Then I'm not productive anymore in my society.
Right, that's the foolishness of what's mine is yours and what's yours is mine. Right? And that's the problem because unless you have because it takes a certain mindset to say I'm going to work for the good of the all. It takes a certain kind of mindset, right? When I visited, remember the kibbutz, right? So I worked on the kibbutz, for some summers. So one summer they assigned me to the gardener on the kibbutz. Now, there wasn't a lot of heavy work to be done. I'd worked in the factory and I worked in fields, but everybody was on hiatus that summer. So they said to the gardeners, the gardener was this lovely guy and he went around in his little tractor and the fact is that his coffee breaks were longer than anyone else's coffee breaks, right? And there was a sort of resentment in the kibbutz that this guy worked less and got more, and this happened. This is a problem, even with a socialist ideal. Take a look with me inside. Let's go back to the text for a few more minutes. Is that okay? Yeah. We're on page 104 and visit Sodom. All right, so make sure your pockets are, put your wallet way down in your pocket. Hold on to your purse. You ready? Page 104, chapter 19. 2 angels arrive in Sodom in the evening, as Lot was sitting in the gate of Sodom. Why is Lot sitting in the gate of Sodom? Because Lot is Abraham's nephew, and Lot understands the ethic of hospitality. And you sit in the gate in order to find out what? If anybody's coming and needs a place to stay. If anybody's coming and needs a place... Sorry? Well, it wasn't a boarding house. This was an ethic. This was a very important ethic. Right? It could be a judge. He's a leader of the community. But I think this case is, they're trying to point out the hospitality ethic. When Lot saw them, he rose to greet them, bowing low with his face to the ground. He doesn't know these guys. They're strangers. But he is a desert person. The Bible hates cities. There is no city that the Bible hates cities. The first city was created by whom? By Cain. Cain creates the first city. Why? Because if you're a fugitive, that's where you want to go. In villages, they know who you are. But in a city, no one will know who you are. There's moral anonymity. Sodom, every city, Babel, every city is a bad place for the Bible. And the Bible will contrast city life and desert life. The nomadic life has this ethic of hospitality and respect for persons. In cities, not so much. Right? So he bows low. He doesn't know. Please, my lords, turn aside to your servant's house to spend the night. Bathe your feet. Then you'll be on your way early. Just like Abraham. This is Abraham, right? So the Abrahamic ethic of hospitality spoke to his nephew Lot. But they said, no, we'll spend the night in the square. Right? We'll check into the Hilton. And he urged them strongly, so they turned his way and entered into his house. He prepared a feast for them and baked unleavened bread, and they ate. Unleavened bread because he didn't have any bread ready, so he just threw it in the oven and got pizza dough. Okay? They had not yet lain down when the townspeople, the men of Sodom, young and old, all the people to the last man, gathered about the house. And they shouted to Lot and said to him, where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out that we may... Now the Hebrew word is nedah. Nedah means either to know them, to get to know them, to become acquainted with them, or it can mean to have them sexually. Okay? That's where you get the word sodomy. But that's not going to be the sin. Watch. That's not the sin. What's the sin? You have strangers who have come to a home which has opened itself to be hospitable to that home. That is the ethic. What do the people of Sodom want to do? They want to violate the ethic of hospitality. It's the ethic of hospitality, and it is their disregard for the rights and ethics of the stranger. It is their paranoia of the stranger who has come to them. That's going to be the sin of Sodom in the Bible. So Lot went out to the entrance and shut the door behind him. So the images you have where? Lot is standing and his back is against the door, and in front of him is the mob. So what is he about to do? He's prepared to sacrifice himself to protect the guests who have come under his household. Because that's the ethic of the desert. To protect the stranger who has come into your home, you sacrifice everything that's valuable. And there's Lot standing with his back against the door, and he says, I beg you, my friends. It's more than that. It's actually, I beg you, my brothers. Vayomer al na achai tarayu. Right? I beg you, my friends, do not do wrong. And listen to what he says next. I have 2 daughters who have not known a man. Let me bring them out to you, and you may do them as you please. But do not do anything to these men, since they have come under the shelter of my roof.
Wait a second.
No, but what has he done? What is he offering them? The most valuable thing he has in his life. The lives and the virtue of his daughters. I want you to understand what's being said here. Lot ascribes to this ethic of hospitality. And to him, there is nothing more sacred. A guest has come into your house and they are threatened. you use every means possible to protect them, even the lives and virtue of your daughters. And what's being shown here, this is righteousness in the Torah's idea. You see how far he's willing to go to protect these people, and how vicious the mob is. How vicious the mob is, that they want the strangers, not the daughters. Because Sodom is a place where no stranger has any rights at all, where no stranger has any standing in the world. Right? But they said, stand back. And then they start talking about him. This fellow, this Lot, he came here as an alien, and already he acts like a ruler. He's really not one of us. He never was one of us. He came here as an immigrant. We let him stay here. Look what's happened. He now thinks he can tell us what to do. He can dictate ethics to us that are not our ethics. Stranger to us. His ways are strange to us. He is a contaminant. He is a pollutant. He will dilute our culture, our ethic, our way of life will be threatened. So what is the sin of Sodom? Do you hear the sin of Sodom? What is it? More than careless. You're right, but it's not even indifference. It's xenophobia. It's this complete divorce between us and them, our people and those people, the indigenous, the ones who belong, and everybody else. Is the foreigner, the outsider, the alien, the stranger, the guest, the visitor, the traveler. They are all threats to us. There is this paranoia about protecting the purity of the folk, the purity of the internal light, right? Now we will deal worse with you than with them. And they pressed hard against the person of Lot and moved forward to break the door. And the image that Lot is standing between himself, his home, and the mob, and he's trying to hold back the mob. I mean, before Lot wasn't such a hot guy, but suddenly you get a sense of there's some heroism in him. But the men stretched out their hands and pulled Lot into the house with them and shut the door. The guests. Now, it's really good if the guests in your house happen to be angels of the Lord. Make a note of that. Okay? And the people were at the entrance of the house, young and old. They struck with blinding light. So they were. That's good. I like that. But what's the metaphor there? They're all struck blind. What's the metaphor? Because they were blind. Because they were blind. And if you maintain, you see, here's the problem with this ethic. If you're so paranoid about the other, about the outsider, about the alien, soon you will turn against each other. Because you will look at your next door neighbor and you will say, he's not us enough. He's not us, whatever us is. He's not, it's the blindness that causes you to eat each other, to destroy each other. And then the men said, who else do you have here in the house? Sons-in-law, bring them out and go, for we're about to destroy the place. The outcry against them has become too great. And Lot went out and spoke to his sons-in-law, who had married his daughter, said, up, get out of the place, for the Lord's about to destroy the city. But he seemed to his sons-in-law as one who jests.
But he has sons-in-laws and they're virgins.
What? Or there's different daughters. He has 2 living at home and 2 living out in the community. Okay? Yeah, fine, come on.
Isn't it comparable to Nazism
It's comparable to all sorts of isms.
and narcissism?
That's a good word. But see, here's the question. How does it look when you go out and you say to people, the behavior you're engaging in is going to destroy the society? And what's the answer? You can either argue with that person, but there's a much better argument. Just laugh at them. He was a lunatic. He's a lunatic. I mean, what? Destroy what? We've been here a long time. Look how prosperous we are. What are you talking about? Nothing can hurt us. What are you talking about, right? So dawn broke. The angels told him to get going, right? Take your wife and your remaining daughters, your 2 remaining daughters, you see? So the daughters that are with you, lest you be swept up. And they seized him And when they began to flee, they said, run for your life. Do not look back behind you. Don't stop. Go to the hills. And he said, I can't go to the hills. So they end up in a little town called Zoar. Look at verse 23. As the sun rose upon the earth and Lot entered Zoar, the Lord rained upon Sodom and Gomorrah sulfurous fire from the Lord out of heaven. He annihilated those cities and the entire plain and all the inhabitants of the cities and vegetation of the ground. Lot's wife looked back, and she turned into a pillar of salt. Why? Tell me why.
Why did she look back and why was that?
Back. And why salt? And what? Come on. First of all, because have you ever been to that area? There are these pillars. Geologically, there are these pillars of rock, of limestone, that turn white when they get wet. That's there. So it's easy to say, well, that's what we're talking about. But there's something deeper than that. Come on. She was crying. Why? Sympathy. That was home. That was home. That she didn't want to leave. All she could think about was where she came from, not where she's going. All she could think about was what she left behind. And not just the stuff she left behind. It was nice there. Everybody made their own business, right? It's her heart went, but you have to. She liked that life. She couldn't imagine a different life. You see, you got it. Go ahead.
But even if she didn't like the life, there was all this destruction.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be sad, even if you thought it was just.
Well, you wanted to run back and throw your arms and protect what you cared for, right? You wanted to run back and hold it again. Salt. What is salt? What does salt represent? It's either a preservative or what else? Nothing grows in salt. It's death. Holding on to that ethic leaves you in a position to be infertile. It's the ultimate infertility. It's the ultimate loss of creativity, of vitality, right? It's a beautiful statement. Yes, go ahead.
She did have 2 daughters there.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it doesn't say they had children.
Her kid, yeah, she has kids back there who didn't want to leave. But I think it's the culture. I think she didn't want a different culture. She liked it. It's good. Listen, if you're in the top 1%, it's good, you know? Yes, please.
Well, it's like a metaphor. I mean, we all look back. We have our children back, like she was saying.
Yeah.
But it's more like a metaphor for not moving forward. And, wanting to stay in that state.
Imagine a political culture that is unable to imagine a forward and it's obsessed with what was. A political culture which worships an idealized past, or a past which was good for some but not all, but now that culture is sold to everyone as the idealized past. Lot's wife is the first reactionary, the one who says, I want to go back to the way things were because it was good for me back then. And the Torah says, first of all, it wasn't a real past. The past wasn't what you imagined it to be. It's a mythological, idealized, made-up past, pretend past, but not being able. But if that's what you're looking at all the time, what was, and you imagine somehow you can take what was and make it again, then you turn into a pillar of salt and nothing grows in that place. Because because that past was Sodom. It was the ultimate place of destruction. Okay, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah,
I know the moral of the story.
I didn't write the moral of the story.
The moral of the story, be careful how you treat the other. They may be angels of the Lord.
Bring angels into your house. Things will be good for you. Have a good Shabbos. Go to the Neshama Minyan now, please.